line. Over there, over there. Send the word over there. That the Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming. The drums rum-tumming everywhere. So prepare, say a prayer. Send the word to beware. We'll be over, we're coming over, and we won't come back till it's over, over there, over there, over there. Send the word over.
Hey everybody, this is SrA Littrell. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Honor Across Arms podcast. I'm extremely privileged to have our next guest is Lieutenant Colonel Christopher Bishop from the United States Air Force. Colonel Bishop, how are you doing today, sir?
Great. How you been?
Oh, doing well. So do you prefer Christopher or Chris?
Chris will be fine.
Awesome. So, Chris, tell us a little bit about your service in the United States Air Force. First and foremost, if you don't mind, letting our listeners know where you're at geographically in the country right now.
So right now I'm located in Papillion, Nebraska, which is a suburb just south of Omaha. So if anybody's familiar with the College World Series, that's my backyard pretty much. As far as service goes, I did just about a little over 22 years, almost 23, in various types of jobs. That's where you and I met a few years ago when assigned at Eglin. And in fact, we even deployed together for a brief time.
Absolutely. Colonel Bishop, tell us a little bit about what you did in the United States Air Force. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, sir, you're an Air Force Academy guy. Is that correct?
I am. I graduated in 1996. Tough as bricks, as we're known. And after I got out of the academy, went right into the bioenvironmental engineering career field, which for those that maybe aren't familiar, in the Air Force, it's kind of your individuals that worry about worker protection, safe drinking water, compliance. So did that for a while. Obviously, disaster preparedness is another issue. So for about the first 15 years of my career, spent most of those at different installations doing that job as a functional responsibility. Then I basically kind of grew into working in a major command at Air Mobility Command at Scott Air Force Base from 2010 to 12. And after that, went back to the base there. Soon after, got opportunity to be a unit commander for 2 years in Albuquerque, New Mexico. After that, had the opportunity to go up and work for about the last 3 years of my career at Air Staff, which is basically kind of the corporate level at Falls Church, Virginia, but part of the Pentagon construct, if you will. So that's kind of what I did. That was my forte. Worked in the medical community, which is where bioenvironmental resides, for the duration of my career, and retired back in the spring, end of April of this year.
Wow, just newly retired.
Newly retired in a recent transition. So working. Anybody got any questions, feel free to call in or email me. I can share some thoughts on how well transition goes after the military life. But I'm willing to help anybody with that.
You know, Colonel Bishop, I think that's a great follow-up podcast, too, if you don't mind. We'll schedule that out probably early next year sometime. That's something that a lot of people have a lot of questions about, but they're just not getting any clear direction on. And I think speaking to somebody or just listening to somebody talk about it that's gone through it very recently can have a very large impact on their lives. So would you mind maybe scheduling that for another day if we can?
Sure, would love to.
Absolutely. So let's go back to your service for a little while. Now, you've been all over the world. Where were some of the stations that you were stationed at?
So I was fortunate enough to spend a lot of my time in the Florida Panhandle. So for those familiar with the Air Force bases, I actually did all three of them. So started out at Tyndall Air Force Base after graduating in 96. Spent 4 years there. Went off to Elijah's Field in the Azores for about 15 months. I was there when, obviously, we all remember 9/11. So I was there watching it from the islands in the middle of the Atlantic.
Wow.
Went back to Eglin for 2 years. That's where you and I crossed paths and worked together. Deployed out of there. We both deployed as part of a nuclear biological team for the five and a half months. Went off to Herbert Field after that for a couple of years. Went to Kadena Air Base in Okinawa, Japan.
Kadena, wow. So,
So,
Colonel, now you have a family. Now, was the family with you during this period of those transitions?
so on and off, yes. So I actually met my wife back in '97. She was a bioenvironmental engineer as well. So we met in tech school, if you will, and she was finishing up her career. So she separated after about 3 years. So we spent our first year of marriage apart. And then she did not go with me to the Azores. So she was with me about a year. Then we were 15 months apart. Got back to, like I said, Eglin for about a year. And then we deployed for 5.5 months. So, and then she went with me to Kadena and was with me kind of ever since until the very last assignment. After I left Albuquerque, she moved here to Omaha. She's a civil service, so she also contributes to our defense mission as well. So she moved here to Offutt Air Force Base and has been working here for the last few years, and I went on to DC for the last 3. So for the most part, our marriage stayed intact. But for those military members out there, joint spouse that are doing it remotely, it's possible. You can survive it.
Absolutely.
It's all about dedicating yourself to not only the mission but to your spouse. And proud to say we survived it and came out on the back end.
Well, and I think that's something that a lot of people will pick up on from this too. We talk about our service all the time from the veteran standpoint, but I am a firm believer that the family serves just as much as the active duty member does. And I think that's very clear and evident in your case where your family's been all over.
Right. Well, and I know I'm sure you've heard it and I can't steal it, but it's definitely something I've heard at many, many different speeches, retirement ceremonies. But truly, we as the military member get to serve. Our families really are the ones that make the sacrifice.
100%.
We're not in a time where we have to go to war. So I agree with you. They definitely serve, but I would argue they have to bear the brunt of a lot of the sacrifice. And my wife is absolutely phenomenal. Is basically from time to time single-handedly raised 3 daughters and works full-time, and she's just an absolute rock star. So very fortunate to cross paths with her in San Antonio many years ago.
I tell you what, you and I both met our wives in San Antonio, which is crazy, and both met our wives in tech school. I think very few people understand that, but it's something that's pretty neat. And I couldn't agree more. She is phenomenal, and she's an asset to this country. Not only did she serve, but she continued to serve, as a mother and as to me the backbone of our country, because that family is the one that keeps us propped up while we're serving, right?
Absolutely, and I can't agree with you more on that. I saw it too many times in the various assignments I had. I think as military members, we can kind of cope and deal with anything thrown at us. And that's why I want to give kudos to our Air Force medical agencies out there, medical support.
Absolutely.
Again, everybody does a great job. All those community outreach programs on bases do a phenomenal job helping us stay connected. Our Airmen and Family Readiness Centers. It's huge because as military members, we can face, deployments. We can face time away from our family because we're serving our country. But anything going on back home that affects our family definitely takes us out of the game and makes us less productive. And it's great to have that network. So, it's not just on the Air Force side. All our services do a good job.
That's right.
Of being community and family when we're gone. So couldn't agree more. If it wasn't for those assets and folks taking care of our family back home, we'd be a wreck wherever we're at in the world.
Well, and the military does a really good job of that too, where, when we deploy or we're forward somewhere, we have that team, that core group that we are around, but that core group still exists back home in the families and the wives and husbands of those deployed personnel that typically they will get together and they work to help each other out. And they are a family just as much as we are a family while we're in the field.
Absolutely. And that's the one thing for maybe those folks listening who, I'll be honest, for the longest time, our family was a little more, introverted. We like to kind of stay within our small group. But, as I spent time apart from my wife and just her willingness, especially when I was in command position, just to kind of work and reach out to her colleagues and to other folks, I would tell people don't hide in your base housing. Get out and get to know the community, even if it's not somebody in your husband or wife's unit. Get to know your neighbors because they truly are your backbone and they give you that strength and they're there to help you, whether it's the car broke down or, can you watch the kids while I go pick up groceries or whatever may be going on, or, you're sick and you need just a little time away. And again, our base agencies do a great job with that, but our small, military community is always taking care of itself.
So true. Today we're joined by Lieutenant Colonel Christopher Bishop, who is just recently retired. I guess you're retired, Lieutenant Colonel Chris Bishop. And we're
Exactly.
here on the Honor Across Arms podcast. Colonel Bishop, you've mentioned Azores a couple of times. Let's go to the area for just a moment. Where's that at exactly, and what kind of weather or climate is that?
So it's basically kind of a temperate climate. It's the islands are belong to the country of Portugal. So
Okay.
of course the predominant language is Portuguese. But the Azores is what I call kind of the bed and breakfast and fuel and gas station, if you will. So a lot of aircraft transiting across the Atlantic will stop right there in the Atlantic. It's probably about 2/3 of the way from the U.S. And I'd say it's probably about even with maybe New York City. But again, because it's an island, you don't get the snow and all those kind of things. So, stays temperate. You do get your fair share of bad weather from time to time, but it's a great place to stop off. Usually maintenance crews, if something happens, they'll stop there briefly on their way over to Europe. So,
Wow.
a great mission, and a lot of folks, very small by nature, less than 1,000 folks, pretty much.
Well, that's what I was about to ask. How large is that when we talk about population-wise?
Yeah, it's even got, well, as far as the military, U.S. military footprint's gotten even smaller over the years. My office used to have a shop there, and now they kind of get support from Europe. So folks come in from Germany to support it now. So it's continued to shrink the military presence there. But a very small little, right there, if you ever look on Google and you want to look up Elijah's Field, they actually have an airport there, the Portuguese do, and it's an airfield shared by the U.S. military on the other side.
Wow.
And
so what's the land lay like? Is it mountainous? Is it an island? I mean, what is that like?
So it's very much island set up. Agriculture seems to be a big thing that's done there. So it's kind of interesting. You see these cobblestone fences that are set up along the roads that are owned by, say, a family. And if they have, a couple of, generation, they may inherit some of that land. They may split it up and set up, cobblestones to parcel out their part of the inheritance.
Really?
And so
that's really neat.
Raising cattle, it is. Had a nice little golf course stuck right in the middle of the island. A couple of, I wouldn't say huge cities, but larger cities. Angra is one of the bigger cities there, and Praia. Praia is kind of the city that's right near the airfield, and a lot of amazing culture there. They do a lot of bull, not running with the bulls like you would think about in Spain,
right?
But they'll basically, release the bulls, and they'll sometimes run down the street, and very festive.
So very similar, right?
Yeah, it's a great culture, and again, unfortunately, we're getting a smaller and smaller footprint, but it was definitely a great assignment to be at.
I'd like to talk about that culture for just a moment. And that's something we really talk about a lot on this Honor Across Arms podcast. This is for people who may they didn't serve and they want to understand what it's like. When you get thrown into a culture that's completely different than what you grew up, what's that like? And what is the culture like in the Azores?
So again, the Azores is kind of a little more rural in nature, kind of more agriculture. For me, it was kind of a natural growth growing up, born and raised in Mississippi, and got kind of used to the rural southern kind of atmosphere, kind of, laid back, easygoing, but, a lot of hardworking Portuguese work on the base and support the military there as well. Another assignment I had, we mentioned Kadena, that's obviously Okinawa, so that's
yes, sir.
Japan. And, that's, even a more distinct culture. So I would tell people, for me, I wanted to join the military and see and touch as much as I could. And so the opportunity to see an opportunity, never got to go into mainland Europe, if you will, like Germany or England and get stationed there. But Azores was a nice, compromise, if you will, that the military let me at least get that far. And then the 4 years in Okinawa. So I would tell people, there's obviously that initial concern, but again, going back to that small family, military family approach, if you look at it as an adventure and take advantage of that opportunity and really try to, get absorbed into the culture and learn as much as you can. My middle daughter was actually born in Okinawa. So,
oh, wow.
It's a story to share with people and say you have a little Okinawan baby, as we call her. Who's
That's too funny. So, Colonel, just a question on that one. So, if an active duty member has a child that's born in another country, do they get dual citizenship, or is there a process they can go through to do that? How is she viewed?
So, I mean, she is a American citizen. They obviously have